She was treated worse than a stray dog inside her own home, yet fate twisted cruelly and beautifully when the coldest CEO in the city found her trembling in the rain, and in that moment, his vow changed her life forever. Don't forget to subscribe for more heart-wrenching and dramatic stories like this. She had always wondered why life had cursed her with existence in a house where her very presence was unwanted, where the air she breathed was considered too heavy, where the food she ate was measured and grudged, where love was a foreign word never spoken and never felt, for in her stepmother's house she lived worse than the scrawny mongrel tied in the backyard, who at least was given leftovers and a pat on the head once in a while, whereas she, the poor girl named Arya, received only slaps, insults, and cruel punishments, her life a constant cycle of hunger, bruises, and tears, and yet she endured because she clung to a fragile thread of hope that someday, somehow, fate would open a door for her to walk out of that prison. But until then she washed dishes until her fingers cracked, scrubbed floors until her knees bled, and obeyed orders barked at her like she was nothing more than dirt beneath her stepmother's jeweled shoes, and her stepsister, Camilla, reveled in making her life hell, stealing her clothes, tearing her books, framing her for mistakes, laughing as their mother whipped her for sins she never committed, and all the while Arya's heart grew quieter, lonelier, and hungrier for kindness that never came, until one rainy night when her stepmother threw her out of the house for breaking a vase Camilla had smashed deliberately, and Arya wandered into the storm barefoot, her thin dress clinging to her shivering body, her skin freezing as the rain soaked her hair, her eyes swollen with tears, and she stumbled onto the busiest street of the city, where cars splashed muddy water against her legs and pedestrians hurried past without a glance, treating her like she was invisible, until headlights blinded her, a horn blared, and she froze like a deer as a black luxury car screeched to a halt inches away from her trembling figure, the window rolled down, and a deep, commanding voice asked if she had lost her mind standing in the middle of the road, but when Arya looked up, she met the stormy gray eyes of a man whose face was the definition of power, wealth, and danger, none other than Alexander Knight, the youngest and most feared CEO in the country, a man rumored to have a heart made of ice and a soul made of stone, yet in that instant something within his gaze flickered, something softer than steel, as if the sight of this drenched, fragile girl in rags cracked a part of his cold mask, and without understanding why, he ordered his driver to bring her in, and though she resisted, insisting she had nowhere to go and no right to sit on the leather seats of someone like him, Alexander leaned forward, his voice low and sharp, telling her that if she stayed in the rain she would die before morning, and death was not an option he would allow, not tonight, not when his chest ached at the sight of her. So reluctantly she sat in his car, hugging herself, too afraid to speak, her body shaking not just from cold but from years of being conditioned to believe she was unworthy of kindness, yet Alexander draped his expensive coat over her shoulders without a word, and she nearly broke down right then, for it had been years since anyone had offered her even a shred of warmth, and when he took her to his mansion, a palace of glass and marble that looked nothing like the darkness she had come from, she thought surely this was a dream and she would wake back on the cold kitchen floor, but instead, a maid showed her to a room larger than her entire house, and she lay there staring at the silk sheets, unable to close her eyes for fear they would vanish, and in the morning, when she tried to slip away before anyone noticed, Alexander caught her, demanding to know where she thought she was going, and when she whispered that she could not repay him for anything and had no right to stay, his jaw clenched as he told her that he didn't save people only to throw them back to the wolves, and when she asked why he, a man who could buy anything he wanted, cared about a girl like her, he said something that would haunt her for nights. Because once, I was thrown away too, and I swore if I ever found someone drowning like I once did, I would pull them out no matter what, and though his words were clipped, his eyes held a truth she could not deny, so she stayed, but staying came with storms of its own, for Camilla and her mother soon discovered where she was, and they slithered into Alexander's company, pretending innocence, trying to poison his mind against Arya, painting her as a liar who sought pity to trap a rich man, and Arya, terrified of losing the fragile safety she had just found, begged Alexander to believe her, but he did not need her plea, for he had already investigated her past, uncovering scars deeper than skin, and he silenced the stepmother with a warning so sharp she nearly collapsed, declaring that if she ever dared approach Arya again, he would crush every last ounce of her wealth and power, and for the first time in her life, someone stood between her and the cruelty that had always swallowed her, and yet the story did not end there. For Alexander's world was not free of shadows, and soon Arya found herself entangled in his battles with rival corporations, betrayals within his own company, and secrets buried in his past, secrets that made her question whether he was truly her savior or a man as broken as she was, and the more time they spent together, the more she saw beneath his icy mask, glimpsing the boy who had once been abandoned by his family, rising alone to build an empire, vowing never to need anyone, until her presence began to thaw the frost around his heart. but with that warmth came danger, for Alexander's enemies realized she was his weakness, and they struck, kidnapping her one night when she returned from the library he had built for her, dragging her into a warehouse where shadows mocked her with promises of ransom and revenge. Yet even as fear consumed her, she remembered Alexander's vow, and true to his word, he stormed in like a fury, not caring for bullets or threats, tearing her free from their grip, and when he held her against his chest, whispering that he would rather burn the world than let her be harmed again, Arya realized that the life she had been forced to live worse than a dog was not her destiny. It was merely the beginning of a story where she would rise from ashes, loved and protected by a man who had vowed forever, but forever was not smooth, for her stepmother, desperate and venomous, returned with one last twist, revealing that Arya was not her real daughter but the child of a woman Alexander's father had once loved, meaning Arya and Alexander were bound by a fate darker than either had known. Yet instead of tearing them apart, the revelation only made Alexander vow harder, saying he did not care whose blood ran in her veins. She was his to protect, his to cherish, and no secret could break that. And so Arya, the girl once treated worse than a dog, finally found her place not at the feet of those who despised her but beside the man who turned her scars into strength. And though battles awaited them, though the world would try to test their bond again and again, they knew that sometimes fate does not just curse, it redeems, and in redemption, love becomes unbreakable, eternal, and fierce enough to change even the coldest hearts forever.